Well, I appreciate being asked by Nick and Chris to be part of this summit. I want to first acknowledge that I'm presenting research from one of my grad students from the Forestry Department, Kory Garrie, who's on a hotshot crew out west somewhere. I'm sure he'd love to be doing it today, but he's out west. And then also contributions from Drs. Karla Gage and Dr. Gibson, who were both on Kory's thesis committee. They contributed greatly to the study, both in design and analysis and description thereof, but any omissions or misrepresentations that I make today are clearly my own. So for the next 12 minutes or so, hopefully I can get through these slides discussing prescribed fire effects on the invasive species, Japanese chaff flower in Southern Illinois. So here where we work in the central hardwoods, generally we're utilizing fire for lots of different applications, generally under a rubric or a scheme for oak ecosystem management or resiliency, managing for biodiversity through woodland habitats, pollinator maintenance, CRP parcels, site prep, everything down the line to controlling mesophytic species in our understory. And then as you see Kory there on the right-hand side, burning his test plots, trying to see how prescribed fire might affect various invasive species control. And I don't like to call it control, I just call it like maintenance. So as a prescribed burn manager, I walk into a site like this, and this is one of Kory's sites. I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot of fuel moisture. How is this ever going to dry out? Can I get it to burn? What's going to happen when I burn? Is it going to get worse? As we've heard all through this morning and through all of Dr. Gibson's lab's research, chaff has lots of really interesting ruderal characteristics. So it makes it a great invader. And as a land manager working with state agencies and with landowners where a lot of this stuff occurs, what might I be doing as a burn manager to this species if I upset it in some way through burning it at the wrong time of year or whatever? So the objective of Kory's thesis was to study the effects of prescribed fire on some well-established populations of chaff flower here in Southern Illinois. His working hypotheses were that prescribed fire would reduce the survival of established chaff flower stems the following growing season after treatment, prescribed fire. So they're looking at adult chaff survival. The second hypothesis stated prescribed fire would reduce the density of chaff flower stems the following year after treatment. And there we looked at 4 different size classes, essentially depicted to the right there. Our site selection, I believe in 2014, 2015, when we looked at this, I think there were 6 or 7 sites maybe in Southern Illinois. So we picked out 3 on private landowners down here in Lower Saline and Pope County in southeastern Illinois. They were under, I would say, mid-age, mid-successional oak canopies that provide a lot of nice oak leaf litter that we can move the fire through on the surface. Almost 100% populations of chaff in the understory. And because we were on private land, we were essentially able to burn just that very year for Kory's field season. Methods, essentially, we established these 2.5 meter square treatment blocks, as you see in the upper image. This is one of the days of the burns. We have the hobos. We looked at the temperature, which were pretty unremarkable, honestly. But we burned or unburned these block areas across the 3 sites. Each site had 24 of these treatment areas, treatment blocks, and we tried to burn between 8 to 12 to 15 of each. But again, those were all dependent on weather conditions of the day, fuel conditions, capacity, burn windows. So those were mixed, unfortunately. We had this fixed sample area, burned or unburned. Within that sample area, we tagged 3 adult individuals. And then within the center, we had this nested quadrat for censusing the different size classes. Just in a schematic, again, we had this 2.5 meter treatment area, either burned or left unburned. And within that outer area, we tagged 3 adults to look at survival following fire. And then we censused density in either the meter square or for the cotyledons because of their high number in half-meter quadrats. The treatments really boil down to 2 kind of burn windows, if you will, and this is important for the curing of the fuels. The early fall, the September and October on sites 1 and 2, fuels weren't cured. The weather was right, but the fuels just weren't conducive really to burning. However, the December and January burns were great. We got great consumption. So that shows up later in our results. And I think that's one of our most important findings. Data analysis, essentially, Kory developed 5 different model sets looking at responses in adult survival and then the different size classes of density. And each model set incorporated different explanatory variables of the 3 sites, burn versus unburned treatments, and then year. And again, that's really burn window or burn efficiency. And we used KK's information criteria to compare the models and to identify our most probabilistic model that explained our results. So jumping into the results, of the 216 original tagged adults, we relocated 195 of those. And the good news is that if you burn the adults, you will cause some mortality. The problem, as we've seen with Dave's present or Dr. Gibson's presentation before, is that there's just multiple generations coming up underneath those top killed adults. So good thing is you can kill about 31% of the individuals that you actually burn. Looking at survival across the sites, site 3 had the best mortality with 37% mortality. Site 1 had I believe it was 24% mortality, and site 2 had 13% mortality. Again, site 3 had the best burn conditions, the best fuel moisture conditions, and we had the best burn effects on that site. Results across the size classes were kind of mixed, but if you look at sites 1 and 2, which again had lower burn efficiency, so we didn't kill off any juveniles or seedlings. The following year, we had increased density of adults, so those juveniles moving up into the adult size class. However, on site 3, which burned very well, we had reduced density of adults. Looking at juvenile density, again, some mixed results. Site 1 had an increase in the burned area of the burned actually increased juvenile density, whereas on sites 2 and 3, burning reduced juvenile density. Overall, there was the population decreased of juveniles from 2015 to 2016. Unfortunately, we didn't have the long-term enough data to really look at population dynamics there, but that did occur that year. So to summarize, looking at our top models for either survival or density, you can see that fire as a treatment was present in 3 of our 5 top models. It's confounded a little bit by I'd say the burn window again, but adult survival, we reduced. Juvenile density, we were able to reduce on a hot enough burn. And then cotyledons as well decreased. So in discussion, our effects of fire on chaff survival and density varied, of course, across sites, fuel conditions, and size classes. We reported decreased survival of adults with fire. That's a great idea, or it's a great result. And we saw reduced densities of juvenile in the cotyledon and size classes. However, fire did not affect density of the adult and seedling classes from year to year. So I think a take-home message as a burn manager is and I noticed this in Chris's presentation at the beginning, looking for that late fall thatch and that early winter thatch. Burning in the late growing season is not going to kill these things. It seems like if we wait for that nice curing real dry fuels, nice late Indian summer, now in late November, we can probably kill off some chaff and perhaps some of that woody encroachment. The one real watch out situation. Now these are ramets, vegetative regeneration from the base of adult individuals. So again, you can see the 31% we killed of the adults census. However, we had about 41% or 42% actually increase in their Ramet response to fire. So you can top kill these things, but the ramets and the vegetative reproduction is a real watch out situation. So some continued research for the future. If we allow chaff to fully cure and burn in dormant season, may we increase fire intensity enough, to lead to greater top kill? Hopefully. Through repeated fire entry, may we see a decrease in the population of chaff through time? Lots of further discussions, I think, for Dr. Gibson and I on this topic. What will result if we target the non-reproductive stages of chaff with prescribed fire? And then perhaps how does fire affect seed set and dispersal rates or mechanisms, if at all? And that's just a few of the ones that come to mind. So I know we're out of time. People are probably checking out for lunch. So I just want to thank again the committee for having me. Thank Kory and all the fire dogs. I know there's about 10 or 15 fire dogs that are in the participant list. So my hat's off to all you folks for helping out with Kory's research through the years. And I'm done with that, sir.